Hi everyone, this is my very first LinkedIn Live. I started playing with it this morning and literally just set it up. So I wanted to hop on today and just check out this feature, which is really cool, I think, but at the same time, I still don't really know what I'm doing. And I have no idea if somebody is watching. Oh, okay. No, it is there. All right. So there's that. Let me see if I can somehow see this. Okay, perfect. So now I've got it. Oh, and people are saying hello. Hi, everybody. Hi, Mike. Oh, yep, you see me. Hi, Dr. Tammy Ferrante. Hi, Will. Hi, Prashant, Priyav, Sachin, Patrick, Jonah, Lahu. Hi, everybody. Oh, so that's really exciting. So there's a couple things that I wanted to hop on to talk about in my first LinkedIn Live. And you know what? I honestly didn't think through too much how I wanted to share those things, but I've been doing a lot of thinking about how in data science it seems like people have shiny object syndrome, right? Like everyone wants to learn about the newest and hottest techniques, and just recently I started using Recipes, the R library that allows you to do data pre-processing like really easy. And I was talking with a friend and he's like, oh, but you know, if you wanted to talk about data pre-processing, nobody's gonna hop on because like that's not as sexy. But just to give some context, right? Like we all talk about how data cleaning is like a huge percentage of the job. You see people quoting 50%, 60%, and like my experience has been in the past that it is a ton of work, right? It's, you know, I have done analyses before where if I want to change everything, my character variables to factor variables, I've literally written a loop and said, okay, loop through all my variables. If the variable is character, convert it to a factor. And same with, you know, removing variables that are basically the whole variable is a constant or whatever. And I know it's not going to be significant in my model, but if I have a lot of variables and I'm not going to go through them all by myself, you know, I'm writing a loop. And so literally I would have a Python notebook, or I'd be in our studio and I'd write these loops and I'd be like, okay, now I'm going to change all my character variables to factor variables. Here's my loop. And then, you know, over time, like one of the most exciting things to me was when I think feature tools, when I started using the feature tools library in Python and I could use get dummies. And all of a sudden, you know, I was in a position where I could turn a number of factor variables into dummies, like in a line of code. And that was so huge to me. And if you are a data scientist, and you've worked with large data sets and lots of factor variables, I know you feel me, right? And so that was sort of my life, and my plight was like, hey, if you're a data scientist, you've got to be really good at writing case statements, because before get dummies, literally, if I wanted to hot encode a variable, I was writing case statements to recode these variables. And then, so I just got introduced to recipes in Parsnip, recipes in our studio in R, and literally I'm pulling up my code right now. I don't have the functionality to share my screen with you, but like you can set up a recipe that is your pre-processing pipeline. Hold on, I'm just going to check on the questions for a second and see if anyone... Oh, thanks Mike for plugging my shirts. Yes, I'm actually wearing one right now. Pipe to bed. Supposed to originally be Pipe Dream, but my other R friends were like, oh, I love the Pipe to bed shirt. And I was like, okay, well then I guess that's what it is. But yeah, so back to recipes, right? Like I have lived my life spending a ton of time cleaning data, and it's an iterative process, right? Like I'll pull in my data, aggregate it, typically in SQL, create a huge table, and then I'd manually inspect it and I'd be like, oh, okay, I know I have nulls in these variables and this is how I'm going to handle those and this is how I'm going to handle these nulls, and I'd manually go and do that, right? And we're never going to get rid of those context type things, right? Because not all nulls can be zeros. We need to think about whether it's something we can impute. If you think about page load times, right? Like if somebody's page load time was 0, the algorithm would think that it was very fast. And so those types of nulls we need to remove. And, you know, if we don't have to remove nulls and they can be 0 or they can be imputed, then we of course want to do that, right? So like there'll always be things. But literally I'm looking at this code right now, and so this is from my Parents of Data Science survey that Kate Strachny and I did, which if you haven't seen the Shiny app that I built yet, it is on my website. And it's super cool, and what's coolest about it is that I built it in 3 days, right? So my only experience I had ever had with Shiny was, you know, workshops at ODSC. Jared Lander gives a workshop at like all the ODSCs on creating Shiny apps, you know, and what you end up with is like a drop down and an interactive chart or whatever, and that is as far as I had ever gotten. And now I have, you know, a Shiny app up on my website that I absolutely could have spent more time on. The, you know, I should probably have used a distribution instead of counts, but the data is also really small, and I want to give that context so people don't walk away thinking things are potentially statistically significant when they're not. And that was definitely a side tangent that I just went on. But yeah, so that's the data that I'm dealing with, that I'm looking at right here. And the things that I was most excited with about that were, this was a data science, this was a survey for data scientists who are parents, and I asked them things about, you know, demographics and how much money they make and how long they've been in the field, but then also their experiences, like do you feel like it's difficult voicing your needs? To like be able to leave for, I don't know, concerts at your kid's school, or do you just find it? You can see the questions to the survey, but that was the general idea, was like, you know, have you ever changed jobs to try and pursue better work-life balance? And I was really interested in, like, you know, in tech and specifically in data science, do we have, you know, as many of these struggles as in other industries? Because my experience has been that my opinion has always been valued, even though I've had difficulty earlier in my career expressing it. Of course, as my career has progressed, I really feel like I have a voice, and I feel like I'm very respected in data science, and I was just interested, you know, do people feel the same way? And, you know, I know in other industries, it's very stressful sometimes to manage having children and working. And so this is the point of the survey. This is the data that I'm talking about. But then this recipes library that I'm talking about, right? Literally in a couple lines. So, you know, I'm saying, hey, here's my data set. And then I'm saying, okay, remove these variables. Next line. anything that's almost all a constant, any variable that's almost all a constant, remove those. Anything that is a character, change it to factor, one line. And then, get dummies, which is not it's get dummies in Python, but here it's step dummy. So it's going to hot encode all my variables that are relevant for being hot encoded. And then, I say, hey, if in one line, any of the variables that are really sparse, there's only a couple ones and they're mostly zeros, it removes those. And then again, another thing that is saving me so much time in my life is there's, just like I did for the hot encoding, removing the ones that only had a couple ones, in my categorical variables, the categories that only have like less than 3% of the variable is, a certain category, grouping those all into an other, right? My whole life I've written case statements for that, and like here we are. And like I just feel like people don't think that talking about data cleaning is sexy. It's not what's going to drive the signups for your webinar, if that's what you want to talk about. But here I'm on LinkedIn Live and you're listening, so that's cool. But anyways, so in the webinar I'm doing with Matt Dancho in a week, I'm literally going to screen share and show you this recipes code that I'm straight up looking at, but on LinkedIn Live I don't have the functionality to share my screen with you. I can upgrade my broadcasting tool so that I could do that, but as of right now I can't. But the link to register for the webinar on the 15th is at the top of this post or underneath. I don't know. I'm actually not that familiar with LinkedIn Live, but I linked it. And so literally what we're going to go through is the parents of data science data, which if you follow my blog at all, there is a link in my most recent article so that you can download that data set. So that data set's available. We're going to walk through this code and I'm going to show you line by line how I pre-process the data. We're going to demo Matt's new correlation funnel package. So he created a correlation funnel package which produces like this really awesome visual that, right, because we've all seen correlation plots before where you get a box and you sort of have to say like, okay, this variable with this variable and this one's, darker, so this is more correlated than this variable is with this variable because it's lighter, right? And so this is me using hand gestures. But you've probably seen these correlation plots or you can get, a printed correlation output, right? But here you get one plot and it just says the variable and it's got the outputs and how correlated they are is how far away they are from the center of the thing. It's really cool. I think you should come and see, that being used because it's interesting and it's always fun when people in the community like create their own packages, right? That's like a power of example. And I think that one of my like big missions that I'm trying to get across too is that because I get a lot of questions from people about how do I do my own portfolio project? And it's like, well, here I am right here. I literally came up with a survey. I shared it on LinkedIn. I asked all my friends on LinkedIn to share it. I collected some data. Then I built a Shiny app with it that I put up on my website. So that's like a data product that I can show to somebody. And then now, I'm going to walk people through my code, which I can put up on my GitHub. But we're going to talk through all of the, first we go from wide to long, and then we do pre-processing, and then we break it into testing and training splits, and we're going to do a very simple cart decision tree, and we'll make a pretty plot with that, but then we're going to use XGBoost too. And so the variable that sort of looked interesting to build a model on was whether or not people have changed their jobs to get better work-life balance and what were the drivers of that. And so I'll literally take you through the code. I'm going to send you the code afterwards so that you can play with it yourself or modify it for your own data set. And the accuracy on the XGBoost model was really good, and showing you how you get those plots of the feature importance and stuff so that you can show those to your stakeholders when you're building models in industry. So I think that I basically came on and ranted, but this is my first LinkedIn Live, so I'm going to give myself a pass, and I'm going to check and see right now how many people are on. Yes, Carla Gentry, she said, yes, manual. We need people to look at the data, not just write Python scripts. Yes, it is a major part. However, it is getting simpler, and there are certain things that are absolutely never going to go away, but the idea of me having to write 50 case statements to, hot encode variables or to recategorize my factors so that they're in the format that I want them, that's going to be reasonable for modeling, that is going to save me a ton of time in my life. And Carla, I'm so glad that you hopped on. So am I going to record this? Or are you talking about the webinar? So the webinar is on the 15th, so you can join Matt Dancho and I, and we're going to show this code. We're going to talk about the data. I don't know if you know both of us, but we're really fun, so it's going to be fun, and we're both super passionate about talking about R. So, that's another thing I want to talk about too, because I see a lot of people online, specifically, people who come from a coding background, and very often they say that, Python is it. Don't think about R because Python is it. And, I just got to tell you, I love R, and I'm a stats mathematics person. My bachelor's degree is in mathematics, my master's degree is in stats, and I've just found my way around R that, I'm just efficient and very useful, and it's intuitive to me. Like I said, I have a Shiny app up on my website. If I was trying to learn Dash, it probably, yes, the functionality is similar across. And if you have a degree in computer science, R probably isn't for you. That's true. Or maybe it is, because there's plenty of algorithms. R has existed for statistics for a long time, so there's a lot of niche statistical algorithms that you may want to use someday, and you may have to hop into R. But I just want to debunk that whole there's no demand for R, or don't worry about R. No, it's not for everyone, but for the math stats person, or the person who's coming from business and has been, working more just in the business side of things, and they want to hop into coding, this is a great tool for you to learn, and it's open source, so you can start poking around, and see if it's for you. Oh yeah, Matt, thank you so much for linking to my Shiny app that, again, I built in 3 days using Matt's course. So Matt has a course on Shiny apps, and I literally opened this up, and so honestly, there's a ton of content. I don't think that most people could do it in 3 days necessarily, unless you were I'm going to do this in 3 days. But I went in and I was I'm going to get this Shiny app up, and he honestly taught me about all sorts of CSS that I had never played with before. And lots of different things, and I was able to find all the pieces that I needed in that course to do everything that I needed to do to get that Shiny app up and running on my website really quickly. And so now I'm going through the comments again, but yes, Tidyverse is a game changer. I was in base R for 10 years, more than 10 years. So I started using R in 2004. And you can find your way around, right? Like sometimes the documentation is a little bit confusing because things weren't standard across packages. And so with the introduction of Tidyverse, what that gave us was like a set of grammar that we can use that makes sense, and there's like no surprises, right? Like it's hard to explain, but basically in base R, like you'd download a package and somebody had coded it to in a way that makes sense for them, but sometimes you'd be like, oh, how does this work? And with Tidyverse, it's like there's a set of grammar and rules, and so the new packages are coded in a way that you're going to be able to read the documentation, and it's going to be intuitive because although it might be new, you're following these tidy principles. Yeah, so, I mean, if anyone wants to ask me questions, because I feel like that's what we do when, at the end of a live. And by the way, thank you guys so much for joining me on my first LinkedIn Live. I feel like this is, sort of like a milestone. Going live on LinkedIn. So, if you're here and you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. Again, we talked about how R isn't for everybody, but R is fantastic and there is a demand for it. If I say this all the time, but a couple months ago I went in on Indeed.com and I did a search I wrote a blog article about this. I did a search for data scientist, and then I did a search for data scientist and R in the United States. And then I did a search for data scientist, Python, R. And so 55% of all the data scientist title jobs in the US were asking for Python and or R. And so, and it's also been my experience working across numerous companies. When I was at Vistaprint, we automated like 80% of our testing. And so we built out this huge modular thing that allowed us to say, which test it was, give the ID of the test, give the ID of, people with this ID were assigned to test, people with this ID were assigned to control, and the page that the test was happening on. And it gave back like an HTML document with all of the metrics that you could ever want without having to go through that whole thing manually, right? So like finding out if the change that we made affected how many people reached out to customer support, or if it affected sales or conversion or average order price or whatever, like anything you want, or if, maybe that product, it didn't affect conversion, but maybe there were like sister products that conversion went down with that test or whatever, if it affected like upsell, cross-sell. And it went from being something where like to do a test analysis, you would expect to spend probably 2 days, 3 days doing that analysis, or at least hours. And here it was, you plug in a couple things, hit run, it would run in the background, and you'd get an HTML document with like the main metrics, right? And so that was done in R. So, and at a large company. So companies are using R. I then went to Constant Contact and I could use whatever I wanted. And sometimes I wrote things in Python, sometimes I wrote things in R, sometimes I wrote things in Python, and then used RPy too, because when I got down to it, I found that the algorithm that I needed to use was a little obscure, and there wasn't functionality for that in Python unless I wanted to code it myself, which I didn't want to. Okay, so now I'm just reading the comments again. Does it make sense? So this is Mohit Sidera. Does it make sense for everybody, irrespective of academic qualification, to get into data science just because it offers you a secure career? So everybody? No. I think that I am a nerd, and I love the fact that we've gotten this huge community and that people are really excited about mathematics and statistics and coding, because these are all things that I have absolutely loved. since I started my university degree in 2001. And in 2001, there was, 8 people in my mathematics degree. Like, that was our whole class, and it was a large university. And then I went to Worcester Polytech for my master's in 2008, and I was one of four people. Statistics hasn't been popular or sexy, and it's becoming popular and sexy. But because it's popular and sexy doesn't mean that you should do it. If you really freaking love math and you love playing with data, then yes, this is for you. If you invest the time and you're just this is not for everybody. If you're not the type of person who loves figuring out math puzzles and loves, thinking about data and where bias is being introduced and stuff, if that's you and you're a nerd like me, then data science is for you. But if that doesn't sound fun to you, if, aggregating data in a dirty database and finding root causes of issues in a database when you're going to aggregate a large data set for an analysis, if that doesn't sound like something that you want to spend 40 hours a week doing, let's be real. This isn't for everybody. I just love it. Hi, Ajinkya. So I know nothing about quantitative trading. I am 6 years in e-commerce as a data scientist, healthcare, and the utility industry. Those are my industries. Not a finance girl. But Matt Dancho wrote TidyQuant, and he's commenting now, and he's actually shown me some of the things that he's done with TidyQuant. Actually, the new course that he's launching, I think looks at, so you actually build a Shiny app that is taking data live from the Yahoo stock tickers, and you can look at portfolio performance. So you might be interested in that, because that is totally Matt's wheelhouse, and he's the author of TidyQuant. So in the art community, he's kind of a legend. Do I do podcast interviews? This is my very first LinkedIn Live. So I have done 0 interviews on LinkedIn Live. Fabio Vasquez, who's a very, very good friend of mine, Fabio Vasquez and I were doing Data Science Live for oh my God, probably a year now. I am slowly moving away from Data Science Live because it was awesome, but it was taking up a lot of my time, and I have a lot of contract work. I moved into consulting, and so I found time to hop on here, but my daughter's starting kindergarten, and I was starting to take just giving you the real, this is my life. My daughter starts kindergarten in September, and so I thought that it was time to start scaling back on certain things. So he's incredible, and I believe he is taking over Data Science Live himself and still interviewing people. And if somebody wanted to speak, to me on Data Science Live, I'd probably make a reappearance because, I was just texting with Fabio this morning. We're really close. I haven't gone anywhere, right? I'm here on LinkedIn. I'll be here on LinkedIn. I'm trying to set up a life, a work-life balance for myself that allows me to really be available for my children and have a high impact in my career and play with data. So that's my life. I'm a mom. I got 2 kids. I'm trying to be available for my kids and do data. And I try different things. And I did Data Science Live, and it was fantastic. But trying to find more time for my family, I might be moving on from that. What's my favorite application of machine learning in e-commerce? And I think that my answer to that is where can I save you the most money? because a lot of times people will come and you'll get a ticket and it'll be for this analysis. And when you're looking at it, you're like, how much is this really going to save the company? But they haven't actually optimized their like $20 million budget in ad spend. And it's like, let's do that, right? So, if I'm optimizing acquisition or retention or, any of that stuff, I enjoy it all. And actually, so one of my favorite projects was when I was at Constant Contact, and the question was, these people, so it's subscription, and we could see how often people log in. And, with that, when people stop engaging as much, right, because we all know retention models are always their tenure and their engagement, right? And so when we see people's engagement dip, then it became, well, maybe they're a retention risk, and they weren't, because, right, people go on vacation, people's businesses, because we're servicing small businesses, people's businesses have, seasonality and cyclical patterns. And so, in Python, I used Python to pull in the data and organize it the way that I wanted. And then this is actually the instance where I said I had to use R, because I was using TBATS, which is a algorithm for complex and multiple seasonal patterns, which my seasonal patterns that I was looking for weren't complex, but it did allow me to easily tag somebody as whether or not they were seasonal. So basically, I'd take customer one and I'd get their whole, 10 years worth of data, and I'd throw it through the algorithm and, add that to another table, and then I'd take the next customer, right? So it was like this loop that was going to loop through all of the customers in the database. Can't share how many that was because, right, proprietary information. I'm like trying to like bounce along the lines here of what's okay to share and what's not. But, it would loop through people and then run it through TBATS. And, the other benefit of TBATS was that, so I don't know how much you guys care about time series analyses, but one of the big things is stationarity. So my data was going to be non-stationary, right? And so with, other methods, stationarity can be a huge issue. And so TBATS, which stands for trigonometric, box-cox, ARIMA, trend, seasonality, I think. Right? It's based more on Fourier transforms than other methods. So that sort of really worked for my purposes, and I felt confident that the analysis that I was doing was like legit and there weren't too many caveats that I had to give. Okay. While starting to learn statistics, there seems to be a lot of jargon, and it's difficult to read a single wiki page without reading about other words in it. How to get past that phase, where to start? Oh, okay. So I sympathize because depending on where you go, people use different symbols. And so understanding that, two blog articles might be doing the same exact thing, but they're using different notation, and it can get confusing. And so I sympathize with that. I can't think of like good books off the top of my head, actually. So this is a graduate level text, so this isn't for you. But if you're like, really a stats person, this Casella and Berger, I keep it on my desk. It's right here. So that's for the people that are, already math nerds. For the people who are just starting out, I'm trying to think of the name of the book. My undergraduate text was really good. And I can't remember the name, so I apologize. There are, and you know what, Matt Dancho probably has, he's probably already coming to the rescue with the name of a good stats book. But so, yeah, sorry I can't help you. All my books are very very nerdy. But they're, I'd say just keep at it. I'd say, enroll in a course or find somebody who can explain these things to you in clear detail. And a lot of it is like when you get your first job as a data scientist, right? You want your boss to be somebody who has the technical chops so that when you have a question, they can talk through the intricacies of things with you. Right? Because this is a field where we're going to be learning for the rest of our lives. I don't know everything. Nobody knows everything because it's such a broad field. But we're constantly learning, and, it's going to be, who else is it? Jason Brown Lee, Machine Learning Mastery. He's got like a pretty serious blog where he talks about a lot of more simple topics, or the foundations, the basics, in like really easy to understand terms. So I'd say he's a good resource as well. Okay, I am just going to check the comments one more time. Oh, so here's an interesting question. Mohit asked, what are your views on the scope of data engineering? Do you think a data engineer has to ultimately step into data science as well? No. I think data engineering is like a great field, and it's for the people who are really into doing data engineering functions. And if you're not already following Andreas Kretz, I think his last name's Kretz, follow him because he has a whole YouTube thing, Plumbers of Data Science, and he's very active on LinkedIn, and that's his thing, is talking about different topics in data engineering, and the new, evaluating new tools that he finds, or sharing interesting things in the data engineering space. And so you should check him out. And I don't think he has any aspirations to come over to the side where he's doing modeling. Like people can be, there's plenty to chew on in that area. And there's plenty of ways to grow. And this is random, but I'm gonna throw it out there. It took me because in my career, I thought that the way to progress was to get into management, right? And so, I worked my way up, I got into management, and then I got into management, and I realized that I really enjoy doing hands-on data work. And I also, what's more important is that I found that I can make just as much money or more doing what it is I want to do. Like there isn't any one track, any field that you're in that's like side related or, tangential to data science doesn't mean that, the goal has to be data science. There are people who, are very happy with what they're doing, or do want to get into management and do want to grow their career that way, but there is no one path for anyone, and there are career growth opportunities in areas, and we don't need to think so linearly. Okay. Okay, good. Matt's coming back with okay. All right, guys. Well, I want to thank you again for joining me on my first LinkedIn Live. And again, if you're interested in seeing the code for the correlation funnel, which is a brand spanking new package that Matt built, if you're interested in seeing the XGBoost model, that we built that has good accuracy, but I can't give all the details away. You have to come to the webinar to see the demo. But yeah, no, if you're interested in getting my code and the data set, like I said, the data set's already available if you go through my last blog article. But if you're interested in that, come join us and we're gonna talk through this code and, and give you all the materials so that you can reproduce it for yourself or modify it for your own analyses in the future when you're adding to your portfolio. Okay? All right, everyone, have a fantastic weekend. I am personally going to Sesame Place in Pennsylvania. So I'm going to be hopping on a flight in a couple hours and hanging out with Big Bird and Elmo with my daughter this weekend. And I hope everybody else has an amazing weekend as well.